Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You've been in the news a little bit lately.
A little bit, yes.
You're making a choice not to run again for Lieutenant Governor.
Correct.
What's the essence of that feeling that you have that says now is the time to make that call?
For me, it was about making sure that I could be the voice for the people in a way that felt most authentic and genuine for me. I was independently elected by the people, and given the stakes that we're enduring right now, given the chaos that we're experiencing both at the federal level and a lot of the pain and stress that people are feeling across New York, I wanted to try to figure out how I can meet that moment on my own terms and speak for myself and make sure that when I speak, people know that I'm speaking based on what I believe, based on what I am hearing from the people, based on the pain that I'm connecting with as I make my way around the state. So for me, it was about trying to make sure that in this critical moment where we know so much is on the line, I could be the best leader that I can be.
Does that mean you're running for governor?
No, what it means is right now in this moment, we're the leaders who can give voice to the people who are struggling. People like right here in Syracuse, where we have the highest child poverty rate of the largest cities in the country. 45% of our children are living in poverty. How are we going to lift them up? How are we going to invest in those communities? People can't afford housing, they can't afford health care. What are we doing? As we know there are cuts coming down the pipeline at the federal level with Medicaid and with SNAP and with education, we've got to dig in here in New York. And I feel like I have a responsibility with a platform to make sure that we elevate these issues and not leave communities behind. Right now, not in the future, right now.
I've done a lot of reporting on the concentrated poverty in Syracuse and how it impacts the schools too, which in essence are segregated schools in today's world. Yet we have a county that, suburbs included, is fairly well off. Mm-hmm. How do we blend those lines between city, county, suburb, small town in New York State, which seems to be a chronic problem, whether it's Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, Buffalo, any of those upstate cities?
I was a kid that grew up in Schenectady, working class family, parents worked for General Electric. They always told me that education was going to be the great equalizer for me, the gateway to opportunity. I don't think it's like that anymore. You don't get that shot like you used to get it when you were a young kid growing up in America. You just don't. And the problem is, even though we have a commitment to education, we say, the numbers don't add up. We put way too much pressure on property taxes. That creates deep inequity across systems. So the gap between some kids who are being educated in our state and others continues to grow. So as that gap grows, the opportunities for those at the bottom of that gap shrink. The state needs to do more to help offset the reliance and the burden that we are putting on property tax payers. It shouldn't be like that. It creates deep, systemic, persistent inequities across a system that is meant to create actual equality. We have to actually tackle the structural realities of how we fund our educational system if we really want to penetrate it and uplift all our communities, no matter where you start here in New York.
Let's talk about Washington. We know that the news today was quite dire, historic even, between President Zelensky and President Trump. What does that session in the Oval Office today that you've watched and listened to say about where we are in terms of relationships of states to Washington, the leadership you're seeing in Washington, and how it then can impact a New York State?
What happened in the Oval Office today was a window into a destructive energy that is overtaking the country, that is overtaking the world. It is a reversion back to might makes right. If you're strong, if you're powerful, irrespective of morality, irrespective of sovereignty, irrespective of our shared human dignity, doesn't matter. If you have the wealth, if you have the power, and you have the will to conquer, you can. The fact is, Ukraine was invaded by a bloodthirsty autocrat. He came in there, they kidnapped thousands of children, they bombed maternity wards, they killed tens of thousands of people, and to sit there and watch our president and vice president talk to Zelensky like he was the perpetrator, like he was the one that wasn't the victim, is a slap in the face to who we are as Americans and what we've tried to stand for since the end of World War II and remaking the world order. So this is deeper than just the international stage. It gets right to the heart of who we fundamentally are as Americans, and whether or not we as Americans are going to step up and remember that might does not make right. Power and money and wealth does not make right. Your heart, truth, honesty, decency, that makes right. And it affects how we talk about government, too, at the state and local level. When you don't have moral leaders across every level of government, people get left behind. People who are hurting get left behind. People lose their economic freedom because they're getting squeezed by everybody, particularly concentrated wealth and corporations that come down on people with a profit-centered motivation. This is the culture that we're in. We can't separate power from money and might, and all of it coming to a head at a moment where so many people feel like, where am I in this equation? Where do I fit in all of this? And the energy that we're experiencing right now is unleashed. And we don't have time to just think about it from the standpoint of what's legally permissible, because they don't care right now about the rule of law.
Can't wait for the courts, in other words.
Exactly. We have to go back to a mindset like my ancestors went back to during the civil rights movement, where civil disobedience was warranted, where you had to think about, how do I make it more difficult? How do I put my body on the line? How do I put my very essence of who I am in front of the people in a way that makes you vulnerable, so people understand how much you care about this moment? Somebody said to me, if you were walking down the street with your child, and somebody came up and snatched your child away from you while you were walking down the street with your child, would you stop and say, hey, that's illegal, you're kidnapping my child?
You'd stop
That's
them.
illegal.
You'd
You
physically
would run
step
them
in,
down,
yeah.
and you would snatch your child back. Are we going to snatch our democracy back?
Is there a vacuum of leadership on that front then too, right now? In maybe it's a vacuum that's pulling towards D.C., but is there a vacuum of leadership in our own backyard here?
Yeah. I think that, I don't want to say our own backyard, because I think it's a vacuum of leadership writ large. And to be fair, we've been caught on our heels. And part of it is, and this is something that folks don't want to say, I don't like to say, particularly in my party, we didn't have to be in this position.
How so?
I said Biden should step aside. A lot of folks didn't want to say that, for reasons, in my opinion, that have nothing to do with the people. Party politics, party hierarchy, maintaining relationships within the party as opposed to maintaining a relationship with the people.
Not listening to what the people were saying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Losing that connection to what the people told us they're ready to move on, past Trump and past Biden. And I love Biden. I do. But the people were saying, and I heard them, we got to move past them. We need the next generation to step up. We need to feel like we're going somewhere. What's the future look like? What are we heading to? Let's stop looking backwards. The people wanted that. Where was the answer? And so as that happens, people feel like they're not being listened to. They're not being heard. They're not being accounted for. So, you know, it's kind of hard now, if you let the ball drop in the first instance, to come back around and say, let me save you now. You walked us into the fire. So, yeah, I feel a personal responsibility in this moment, because if we can't speak truth to power now, then when the hell are we going to be able to do it? If we can't figure out how to articulate a way out of this now and hold truth to our values and our principles, when is it going to change? The world is changing right beneath our feet, right in front of our eyes, in a dramatic fashion. So we have to name it for what it is. It's not going to be easy either. And there is no cure-all or panacea. It's not going to like all of a sudden go away because we're speaking truth to power. No. But that is a necessary component. That is how the process begins. Holding ourselves accountable. Holding ourselves collectively and individually accountable.
Lieutenant Governor Anthony Delgado, my pleasure.